Welcome into the Trevor Staub Show, episode number 22. Today we have a pretty special guest. We've got the world record holder for the longest disc throw ever, David Wiggins Jr. We're going to talk to David all about that distance world record. We're going to talk to him about how he throws so far and what he's doing lately because he's trying to get back into the touring life. Let's hop right into it.
Before we get into the interview, we just have a quick word from our friends over at Flippy Disc Golf. Do you want to look fresh on the course? Well, polos are a thing of the past. Find your new style at Flippy Disc Golf right now. Flippy creates super soft, stretchy, and lightweight jerseys with men and women in mind. The lightweight, moisture-wicking fabric keeps you cool on the course and lets you throw smoothly and freely without any snagging or nicking. Flippy also offers customization to your jerseys, perfect for doubles teams, players packs, and sponsored players. All Foundation viewers receive a 10% discount with code Foundation10 at checkout. Make sure to go to flippydiscgolf.com and use Foundation10 at checkout for 10% off.
All right, we welcome onto our guest for the show now. We have the longest thrower in disc golf, the world record holder for the furthest throw, David Wiggins Jr. Thank you so much for joining the show, David.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be a part of it. So, what's up, everybody?
Absolutely, man. Well, I want to start kind of right from the beginning, kind of to get the background before we get into all the distance stuff. Just talk a little bit about how you first got started with disc golf and where everything began.
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, my family moved from California over to North Carolina. I was about 2 years old, so I was just real youngin'. And moved to High Point in a neighborhood that was about half a mile from a disc golf course. And my dad would take me over there. He didn't play the sport before we moved there. He just kind of stumbled upon the course and thought it would be a good way to go run out some energy and have fun and just a cool free sport to play. So started that at about 4 years old, and we were consistent going out there and stuck with it and got involved with the club, and then started to play doubles at a young age out there, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Once I started playing those little events, it kind of went to regional events and then eventually the world championships when I was 9 years old.
Yeah, definitely. And was there like a certain point as you were starting to play that you kind of realized that you were pretty good at it, you kind of had a knack for it, or did it just kind of slowly progress?
I mean, as like a 9-year-old kid, I was just out there slinging the disc for fun. I mean, I didn't have any clue. There's not many kids playing, especially back then. So it was mainly the people in the club that kind of pushed me and my dad to hit some other events because they saw my abilities. So I'm thankful for that. So that was kind of the push for sure.
Definitely. Well, I totally get that. Like sometimes with disc golf, especially, you get into the sport and sometimes you need people who have been in the sport for a while to like realize that you're good for you because you don't really know, you're young, you're new to the sport, and you kind of need the other people to be like, hey, by the way, you're pretty good at this thing. Maybe you should try and play some more events. But, moving past that point, what point did it, if ever, did it click for you that, maybe you could play professionally and make money playing disc golf? Was there a certain point in your career where that kind of clicked for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was probably 12 or 13 years old when I realized that I was competing with, men in the advanced and pro level divisions, and it was like, whoa. I got my first pro win when I was 13 years old, and that was definitely like a wake-up call that, there's potential out there to be successful in the sport professionally.
Yeah.
So, 13.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, certainly an early start. Obviously, distance has been a huge part of your career, being the record holder for the furthest throw and just being known as a long thrower when you were touring and playing consistently. When did you first start trying to throw max distance shots? Like, was there a time where you got infatuated with the idea of, let me just see what's the furthest shot I can throw? At what point did that become a part of your experience within disc golf?
Well, that kind of circles back to when I was a kid and the people in the club were pushing for me to play more events and, for my dad to take me out to all the tournaments that he brought me to. They noticed that I could, kind of keep up with the guys in the club throwing at a pretty young age. So my dad did some research and found out the age-protected records and kind of where I was throwing, and it was in the ballpark there when I was 9 years old, or 9 years old, and he took me out to the field just to see what I could do, gave me some different discs, and that's when I really started practicing or training to throw distance, 8 or 9 years old, and went out and set my first distance world record when I was 9 at 343 feet.
Wow.
And took off from there. I would do it every winter when there weren't tournaments. I'd be throwing distance, and that'd be my focus in the off season.
Wow, yeah. Well, I'm just curious to know, like, at what point, like, what age were you throwing further than I've ever thrown in my life? So just go year by year, and I'll tell you when to stop. So 9 years old, we're starting at 340?
9 years old, 343.
Okay.
10 years old, 399.
All right.
11 years old, 484.
Oh, then you got me, I think. I think that's it for me. Where does it go after that?
After that, 577.
Definitely have me there. Okay.
And then the following year was my first time going to Big D in the desert. So I went from 577 to 735 when I was 735. I was 13 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely covers it. I was going to say 484, maybe on the right day, but after that, yeah, I'm definitely toast. So how many distance records have you gotten in total since you started throwing? How many have you had just at any point?
I've set from the age-protected division of 9 all the way through 16 years old, and then I set every age-protected division from 9 years old up to the open record. I forget where they end. I think it's 18.
Okay.
It's either 16 or 18. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I set the overall world record when I was 16 initially, and that got later broken by Simon, and then I rebroke it with the current record.
And how many of those do you still have to this day?
I've only got a few of them left. I'm not sure on the exact number, but I know several of them have been broken since.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it seems like it'd be tough to break, but obviously, you know, the athletes are just advancing these days. It gets hard for those records to stay. And also like, the technology is advancing.
Technology for sure. My first distance record was with an orc, a champion orc.
Yeah.
So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Big distance disc there.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't see too many of those anymore.
Yeah, so obviously throwing distance, a big part of it is your technique. But, you know, I don't know if you always kind of had to 360, but I was wondering at what point did you implement that to your throw? Was that something you learned right away, or it kind of took a few years before you decided to implement the 360?
I first got introduced to the 360, I think, when I was about 8 years old. There was a local course pro we called Super Dave Gilstrap, and I saw him do it out at our home course, Johnson Street, one day. And I was like, as a little kid, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. That loving disc golf and everything. I was like, I'm gonna try to do that. So I just tried to duplicate it and kept doing it. And it was funny. I think I probably just started throwing it even when my dad would bring me to tournaments, just all over the place. I have a memory of throwing a 360 champion leopard on a wooded fairway during a tournament when I was like 10 years old. And it's like
nice.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It's hard to get away from it. Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun to me. It's still fun to me.
Right. Right. How long do you think it took you to kind of perfect that throw, to really get it down?
I would say I was probably 15 or 16 before I had.
Wow.
Had it really good. Yeah, and I think I've still improved since then, but it took several years to really get it down mechanically exactly the way that it should be, and I was still growing, so.
Right.
It's hard to compare back then to my form now, but yeah, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, well, and because the 360 is such an interesting thing because, you know, obviously pretty much nobody is using it ever out on tour, but it's clearly very important to distance throwing. You know, world records need to be, you know, seemingly need to use it to break a record. How much distance do you really think it adds to your shot, having the 360 and having it down perfectly?
I would say somewhere in the ballpark of 10%.
Okay.
10% distance.
Yeah.
Which, you know, when you're talking 600 feet, you're going from 600 to 660.
Right,
so
big difference.
At that high level of throwing, it's a significant amount of distance for sure.
Yeah, I've always wondered because, you know, just getting the 360 perfectly timed is a huge deal because if I were to try and throw a 360 out there, I would lose distance more than likely. What part of the 360 do you feel like is, you know, gaining you all that speed? Is it kind of just the extra rotation, or is it more of the hop that you take into it?
I would say a combination of the two. I'm able to get a little more, I guess, rotational acceleration, radial acceleration, and then, I mean, my body's really just kind of winding up and capturing a lot of like twisting motion that I unleash at the end of that throw when I plant. I put a lot more energy into it. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the kind of the mechanics of it. You were telling me yesterday that you got to actually get like a 3D viewing of your form. Talk a bit about what that was all about, like what was going on there.
yeah, so Chris Taylor, Coach Chris Taylor, been working with him recently with my form and going into the mechanics of my throw and everything. And he suggested that I go over and do this. It's like a 3D body live imaging scan of your throw. So you got all these sensors. Wow. You got sensors placed on all over your body from your head to your toes, and it captures with different sensors around the room as you throw. And the one that I was using, I think, was called Gears, and it was developed for golf.
Yeah.
And we were working with a well-known golf instructor that was running the software and everything, and it was a really cool experience. And I haven't even seen the footage since we did it. I saw some as we were doing the throws and everything, but we captured some good data. They had weight transfer plates and everything to show the forces going into the throw and everything. So
yeah,
there should be some good information coming out eventually with that and Coach Chris Taylor's training.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think that there's so much data to be harvested with disc golf form. Like we talk about it on our podcast all the time, like how little we know about like what the ideal form is, because we don't really have a lot of numbers and technology to use to go off of. And like in your experience, just going through that process, has it kind of given you a little peek into like how much do you feel you can still optimize yourself? Do you think there's still a lot more to your ceiling as far as distance as what you can achieve just by changing up things that you might be able to learn?
I don't know. I would find it hard to believe that I can put much more into a throw physically,
right?
But maybe changing up a couple, angles and release points or something like that could possibly help my throw. Coach Chris Taylor thinks that I can do a couple things differently and maybe my distance a little bit. So we'll kind of see where that goes and see where this data that we took affects that, and see how we can learn from it and maybe implicate it into my throw.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's super interesting to hear that there are people out there willing to, dive into that and really look at the form and try to figure out the best way to optimize it. So I wanted to talk about kind of the distance record process for a little bit. Obviously, you set that big, first mark of the distance record that you got in your career for the open record, and then Simon Lizotte took it back. After that happened, and you were known as the distance guy, and then Simon took it from you. How much motivation did you have after that happened to get it back and reclaim that record?
I wanted it back pretty bad. Yeah. Me and Simon we've always battled for distance. We've been competing each other in that aspect for a long time. But when the record got broken, I wanted it back, and we were holding the High Desert Distance Challenge that year, and I made it a point to go out and train and go out and throw and put myself in the best position to try to break the record again. So it was definitely a huge motivational factor, losing the record, to get myself in practiced up, good form to try to break it again.
Certainly. Well, and what does the training process look for you when you're like in complete training mode of like, I'm going to get that record back? What does that look like day to day? Like, are you just throwing a ton, or is there lifting going on? Like, what was your technique?
I was throwing in a field specifically for distance 3 times a week. I would give myself a day to rest 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the week. So if I threw on, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, depending on the week, and normally not on the weekends. And then I would lift in between, and I was just kind of experimenting with how I should implement weight training and exercising into the whole distance throwing thing, because there's not a lot of data or people that have information out there on it. And I figured mechanically something similar to throwing distance was throwing a javelin, so I tried to look at Olympic javelin throwers did as far as like explosive workouts, and tried to set up something that mirrored that.
Yeah, that's That's super cool. I mean, man, if you can really get it, if you can narrow down on that weight program, obviously it worked out for you to break the record, man. You should sell that thing. I would do it. I want the David Wiggins Jr. weight, distance program, because it's interesting hearing that. I've never really heard. There's people out there now like Seth Muncie doing disc golf strong, and there's some people putting more focus on disc golf related fitness, but I don't think there's much out there on, if I want to gain distance, what muscle group should I target? And it's cool that you went to like the javelin thrower looking for that parallel. And yeah, that's super neat. That could definitely be marketable. That's just something to think about.
True, yeah.
I would look into that, but so going into that record that you were able to achieve and get back, you're out there in the desert. The wind was absolutely crazy that day. I mean, if you look at there's only a few clips of it out there on YouTube, but like the disc is practically ejected from your hand with that wind whipping at your back. But obviously it was fair. It was all fair game. Simon was there too, and you beat him in the same conditions. You both threw over 1,000 feet, which is just hard to imagine. I just wanted to ask, like, watching a disc travel, because obviously, throwing in normal conditions and watching a disc go 600-700 feet is one thing. But in those conditions, just what was it like getting to see a disc fly 1,100 feet? Like, was it just like almost abnormal to see it fly like that?
It was bizarre. I mean, when it took flight and we knew that it had the right line, which is extremely hard to do, and without wind, but with wind, we didn't think we could get throws off, to be honest with you, but catching the angle just right of your throw in winds like that. I mean, anybody knows playing in 20-mile-an-hour winds is hard. I think my throw was gusting in the 40s when I threw it, but it was just the perfect angle control on it, the perfect flight path, and then it caught the wind, and I mean, everybody was just looking at each other like, what just happened? Like, this thing is so freaking far. Like, I was afraid to hear the number, because it's like I knew that had never happened before. It just went so freaking far.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's safe to say that certainly, was the furthest a disc has ever been thrown, recorded or not. But talking about that, obviously the conditions were such a big factor, and they always have been with the disc golf record setting. What do you think the future looks like as far as setting limitations for the conditions and trying to get that established? Like what kind of process is that going to take? And are you in favor of setting like legal wind conditions and elevation and things like that?
Yeah, I'm all for it. So the regulatory society behind the distance world record is the World Flying Disc Federation, or WFDIF.
Right.
So they establish the rules and regulations for going to set the distance world record. So I'm not sure, where you start with the whole process of establishing a kind of standards on the wind for that. Yeah. But I'm all for it, and I think that would be pretty cool. I think it would be nice to see distance throwing more publicized and for the spectators to see, because it is really cool. Even for me to see somebody throw a disc really far, it's like, wow, can't believe that thing just went that far. I mean, it's fun. People love to see it too. So maybe moving forward, we can try to work on having some televised disc golf distance competitions or at more events, or formalize the ones that we do have, like at the World Championships or United States Disc Golf Championships. For sure. Yeah, I really do think, obviously the current record has stood for a while, but I think it'd be awesome to have, a yearly event where the world record is attempted again and again, to try and just keep it relevant and keep it new. But as far as establishing a legal condition for the record in the future, I was wondering what your thoughts were like on what a wind speed would look like, because like obviously like running and track, they use like a legal wind, and I was thinking for disc golf, like I was thinking like maybe sub 8 miles an hour would be like a legal wind. But what do you think it would be? It's so hard to put a number on it, because I guess in those other sports you're looking at a certain height off of the ground, and when we're throwing the disc, we're throwing it pretty far up in the air, so to measure the wind speeds up there is different than measuring it at ground level or wherever you're standing at. So that makes it a little bit tricky. And then you can't say zero, because it's never zero. So There's a little bit of gray area there, and it's going to be hard to draw a line. So, I mean, you could go indoors, but can you? Do we have the facilities for that? They're out there, but it's hard to get access to. So that poses another challenge to that. So we got to do some thinking on that one.
That is a good thought. I didn't think about like the differing wind speeds dealing with elevation, because obviously, like you mentioned, track, it is a lot more standard. But yeah, I guess we'd have to get into like some kind of aircraft hangar, and that would certainly be interesting to see, though. But so I wanted to move on a little bit from the distance to kind of like your playing career, because obviously you're kind of in the news with that recently. But going back to 2014, so that was kind of like the last year you played a busy touring schedule, was 2014. Obviously, you were super involved in disc golf up until that point. What led to that decision to kind of step away from the sport?
Well, I graduated high school, and I knew that I wanted to give disc golf touring a year. I wanted to do it. I'd been playing my whole life. I wanted to see what I could do on the road and see how I could kind of stack up against the pros touring around the country. And I also had plans at that point to go to college after I did that, to pursue I went to school for a program called Naval Architecture, Marine Engineering, kind of a specific program for ship engineering, ship design, that kind of thing. And, I did tour for a year, and it was an awesome experience. And, that being said, disc golf was at a very different state in its kind of maturity compared to what it is now. I mean, the sport's got to be 3 times the size, numbers-wise, than what it is, or than what it was then. So that decision was a little easier to go to school. I don't know, if I was in the same position now, what I would be doing. But I found an opportunity to start playing again and play some more bigger tournaments and get back into the sport, and it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what kind of, you mentioned like you're starting to get back into it. What kind of led to you deciding to get back into disc golf seriously? And were there other times, even when you were still at school or before now, that you considered getting in?
Yeah, so I kind of focused on just school when I moved down to New Orleans for the program, and it was a decision I made because I knew that I couldn't compete at the events that I would want to compete at, and then I didn't necessarily have the motivation to continue practicing every single day at the level that I was because of that. So I decided to just shift my focus on, going through college and getting my degree and going that route. And I really did not play a whole lot during college. If you look at my PDGA event history, I played a few events every year, and that was pretty much it. And then I graduated, started working, and got a job, and then ended up doing marine surveying on my own. I freelance now, and I have some time to go out and hit the course and play. So earlier this year, at the turn of the year, I set a goal for myself, signed up for Throwdown the Mountain in Florida. And I was like, I'm going to start practicing and play this event. And then it's kind of funny how it worked out. I got a text from Matty O, a couple guys that were interested in doing a filming thing for the Disc Golf Pro Tour, which I didn't really know much of. Yeah. Corey and Kevin, they were interested in doing a segment about me. And I went with it. I was starting to play disc golf again. I was like, you know what, maybe this will help push me, give me a reason to play and motivate me, and it did. And they came and filmed me in New Orleans for a little bit and put together a cool little documentary piece, and they were talking to me about the Disc Golf Pro Tour, which I didn't know much of, and they're like, you just got to get out there and check out an event, and they helped get me into one in Florida, the Tallahassee Open, and kind of went from there. Signed up for a few more Pro Tour events, and it's looking like I'm gonna play a bunch more moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, getting back into it, is there kind of like a timeline that you have in mind for it? Or like, okay, I want to do this year, and then by this point, I want to be able to tour full time with disc golf? Or like, where are you kind of sitting with it right now? Or is it kind of a situation where you're really just feeling it out and taking it day by day?
I'm still feeling it out, but that being said, I know that I need to get my game to a higher level than it is right now. I'm still rusty. I'm sitting at about 1,000 player rating average right now, and that doesn't cut it anymore. To be playing at the Disc Golf Pro Tour and, cashing consistently, you need to be playing better than 1,000 average. So it really wouldn't be sustainable for me to try to make an attempt at that right now. So this year I want to hit some big events, use those as goals to practice and train, and then maybe make a push next year. We'll see what happens, but that's kind of the game plan right now. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, going to those first Pro Tour events this year, since you've been away for so long from the serious competition, how much of it was different to you, and what really stood out as like, oh my goodness, this is so much different than it used to be?
It's just the caliber of the event, and the professionalism, and just the setup and the volunteers and the organization. I mean, it's really everything,
Yeah.
The level of tournament that the Disc Golf Pro Tour, every Disc Golf Pro Tour is at now, is what the majors were, 7 years ago, or maybe even better,
Yeah.
So it's just really impressive, especially the galleries that come out to watch, all the spectators, the disc golfers. I mean, the community's huge now, and people are excited to see it, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, the sport has certainly progressed a ton, and it's the most exciting time ever to be able to play on tour and get out there. We're certainly seeing a lot of people wanting to get back into disc golf now that it's really gotten huge. One more thing before I let you go, I wanted to just get for all the listeners, top 3 distance tips that you can give everybody. Just the 3 things to remember that are going to add some distance to their game.
Top 3 distance tips. Oof. I wish I heard that question before I went on the interview.
It can be as generic as you want.
I can give a few. Okay, I'll start with one that doesn't have to do anything with throwing the disc. Try throwing a lighter disc, see what happens. Don't reach for that max weight disc. In my personal experience, I don't even throw a max weight disc the furthest. If I'm out in a field with no wind, I'm going high 160s.
Okay.
And people that don't throw as far as me should probably go lighter than that.
Yeah.
Another tip would be go back to the basics and focus on the fundamentals. Don't try to put more power into your throw if your form is not what it should be, because that's just going to, maybe injure you, or, it's going to push bad mechanics. You want to get your mechanics down. What do they say? Like, slow is smooth, smooth is fast,
Fast as far. Yep.
Yeah, fast as far. So condense your run up down and practice that step, and then add a few more steps, and then start adding speed to it. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I guess nobody has any excuses anymore. You've heard the distance. I think the light discs thing is honestly super valid, because people get really hooked on like max weight discs. It's become like almost a trend now, where so many people are throwing a disc probably 10 grams heavier than they need to, just because they think that it's going to be like wrong if they do. But I definitely agree that like you just pick up the driver in the 160.
Just try it.
It'll do amazing things for you. Like, people, every time I see people try a lighter disc, they're amazed every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, David, it was great talking to you. We're certainly all going to be rooting you on at any of the events you're playing in the future, and you certainly have the talent, so we're looking forward to seeing what happens. But thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm super excited to be back and playing these events, so I'm looking forward to getting out there on the road and seeing what I can do. Thanks.
Awesome. Yep, no problem. All right, and thanks once again to David for joining the show. It was really cool hearing from him about getting back into the sport of disc golf and just getting some advice on how to throw further. Apparently you need to train like a javelin thrower. That makes sense to me. But make sure to join us next Thursday. We're going to have another great guest. We'll see you then.